So, hello everyone, and welcome to the panel on Grey-Aces, demisexuality, and the ace spectrum. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Katie, and I will be your host for this evening. But not to worry, you will not be hearing too much from me. I need to close up. So, I'm joined by our wonderful panelists, who you should see on the screen. Hang on, in fact, we are missing one panelist. They have just arrived, so I will add them now. There we go, now you have all the panelists. And these are Kayla, who some of you may know as the co-host of Sounds Fake But Okay. Elle or Secret Lady Spider, who is a freelance writer and demisexuality advocate. Debra, who is an indie fantasy writer and runs a Tumblr dedicated to demisexuality. Lauren, who is a member of Scotland's own Secret Triangle. And Pragati, who is the founder of Indian Aces. Now, before I let them all speak, I'm just going to lay out a few uses and ground rules. First of all, you'll see the chat box to your right. As always, if you want to chat, share thoughts and ideas with each other, please feel free to use it. We want you to interact as much as possible. Same rules apply here as they have done throughout the event, so please keep it polite and civil. It is being lightly moderated. We may not be able to keep up with every comment, but if you want to report an issue, please email the address in the description box and someone will try to pick it up. If you do want to ask a question, however, please use SliDo, as my awesome co-moderator Krista may not spot the query in chat. Again, the questions are being moderated, so treat it as you would an in-person conference. There is a real person on the other end of the questions. Anyway, that is it from me. All other information should be in the description box. So I am going to hand over to the first of our lovely panelists, who is Debra. So please introduce yourself, Debra.
All right. Hi again. I'm Debra Renée Byrd. I'm a fantasy author from Dover, Delaware, and I run a Tumblr called Deb the Demi. I'm chronicling discovering demisexuality and the ace spectrum in my 30s.
Awesome, thank you. Elle, would you mind going next?
Yes, so I am Elle, or you might know me online as Secret Lady Spider. I write every other week about asexuality and aromanticism, focusing on demi and Grey-Ace stuff. And I also have a YouTube channel about the intersection between pop culture and mental health.
Awesome, thank you. Kayla, would you mind going next?
Yeah, so I am Kayla. As Katie mentioned, I am the co-host of Sounds Fake But Okay, which is a podcast about sexuality, relationships, all of that. And we focus obviously on aromanticism, asexuality, and demisexuality. And I am myself demisexual, heteroromantic.
Excellent. And Pragati, would you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely not. Hi, I'm Pragati. I'm from India. And I'm glad that I'm in the video. Finally, I identify as a demi-heteroromantic as well.
Awesome. And last but by no means least, Lauren, would you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
It might be a bit anticlimactic by comparison to all these lovely people. My name's Lauren. I'm known as Aspie Angel on Avon. I identify as a Grey-Ace. I'm panromantic, and I also have Asperger's.
Awesome.
I realized I didn't say my orientation in my intro. I'm so sorry. I am panromantic, demisexual, Grey-Ace.
I forgot to. So sorry. Demisexual, Grey-sexual.
As you can tell, this is completely unscripted. So I am now going to hand us over to the part of the session where you, the audience, get to join in. So hopefully you have been submitting questions to SliDo, which you can upvote or downvote, and we are going to put those questions to the panelists. So the first question that I'm going to ask is, how do you actually know that you're a Grey-Ace? The questioner says, I'm still questioning, but sometimes I experience sexual attraction, but even so, I don't feel comfortable with the idea of having sex. So in any order, would you guys like to answer the question?
I guess I'll start.
I can.
Or who wants to?
Go for it.
Okay.
You do.
So I feel like I also use the term Grey-Ace because the way demisexuality, I've always understood it, is that it's a type of Grey-Asexuality, that it's like housed under, like there's the ace umbrella, and then there's underneath that, where's my hand? Underneath that, the Grey-Ace umbrella, and then underneath that would be like demi, litho, everything like that. And I feel like the other reason I use it personally is that sexual attraction is still very rare for me. So I think you kind of have to ask yourself, like, is what I'm experiencing sexual attraction? Research what that is first, and then kind of ask yourself, like, it might be a little uncomfortable, but if you're, trying to find out, kind of ask yourself, have I experienced this? And how many times? Were there any prerequisites? And kind of go from there. I feel like is a good strategy.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anyone else want to answer the question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in my opinion, how you feel about the idea of having sex can be extremely different and separated from whether or not you experience sexual attraction. And for sure, for some people, these could be very interrelated and could function in a way that seems like they're the same thing. But when you really break it down to the smallest of pieces possible, you might end up realizing that they're very, very different from each other and can function in a completely independent manner. So a good way for me was to really sit down and think about what is it that I have felt and how is it that I have felt and what is it not. So also using a lot of exclusion criteria to keep excluding things that it seems like, but it's actually not, helped.
Cool. Thank you all very much. I will move on to the next question, which is, since aspec is fluid and we in the community flow between labels, have you changed your ace status, and in which way? Which I think the questioner is sort of getting at, changing or identifying differently. Have you ever sort of identified differently to how you identify now? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think in high school, I started off thinking I was heterosexual, and then thought, no, that doesn't quite fit. So I ended up thinking, oh, bisexual, that must be the next one. And no, that doesn't quite fit either, because I don't like guys that much. So okay, so it must be homosexual. And then a couple of years ago, I discovered asexuality and thought, that's the one right there. That's why I've been bouncing between labels. So.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, in high school, I did consider myself just heterosexual. Hadn't even heard about asexuality until halfway through college. So at first I was like, okay, heterosexual, just not there yet within, as what do they call it, the late bloomer. And then I heard about asexuality and I thought, almost, not exactly. And then I learned about demisexuality, and it was like that hit the nail on the head for me.
Yeah, you can just jump in. Don't worry.
We're so polite.
we're being very British and very polite, but
yeah,
you can jump in.
Okay. So I also thought I was straight. Like I always thought, like, oh, I have friend crushes on girls. Like I'm like, I really want to be friends with you and hang out with you a lot and do your makeup, and there's nothing to that. And then in college, I discovered bisexuality and also polyamory, which I was like, oh, both of these really resonate, like in a romantic way. And then I thought, oh, I'm pan a few years later, because I kind of figured out that gender didn't really matter to me. And when I was describing how sexual attraction worked to me, I had an ace girlfriend, and she was kind of like that doesn't sound like, that sounds like you're demi. Because I was like, oh, I just want to like go on dates with people and like have nice conversations, and I don't really think about sex. And then through a lot of talking with ace people, I finally came out at like, I think 25 on Tumblr and then 26 on Instagram. And then this last year I started writing about it. So.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty similar to Deb, where I just assumed I was just like flat out heterosexual. And it was actually the podcast I do. My co-host is Arrow Ace. And so we were talking about it a lot. And she kind of knew that I was demi, but let me get there on my own. I kind of gradually realized this is probably what I am, but I was really uncomfortable taking the label for a while. It felt just very final and formal to me. And I think I was just like really afraid of like being like, okay, this is who I am, like actually accepting that. So for a while, I was really afraid of actually saying that's what I was. And then it was a while later where I was like, okay, like, yes, this is it now.
Yeah, honestly, I relate to that. Even sometimes I just would choose to not share that I'm a demisexual because then I have to explain what that is to people. But yes, while growing up, I also assumed that I was straight. And I still, honestly, I feel more straight than not straight because I am demi, but I'm also heteroromantic. But of course, I did assume that I'm a heterosexual, but just really, really choosy and really, really picky. And I got a lot of flack for being like that. She's being a prude and she thinks too much of herself. That's why she doesn't like anybody and all of those things. None of those things made sense to me, but I assumed that something else is wrong with me, is why I haven't started dating till I was in my early 20s. And then I came across the term asexuality and eventually demisexuality, and all the light bulbs went off in my mind.
Yeah, I super identify with like what you're saying about feeling super straight still. Like when I describe myself, call myself demi-straight because I am heteroromantic. And so I still am very straight. There's just like a little added, also here's my sexual orientation.
Cool. Thank you all very much for that. I'm going to move us on to the next question now. So the next question is, how do you explain being demi-ace to potential partners? And how do you deal with them potentially taking it personally if you don't develop sexual attraction to them? I think that is for the people who identify as demi on the panel. Don't all jump in at once.
I would say from my experience, so I would often have demi in like a dating profile or something like that. So it would come up pretty fast. And I would usually just explain it as like, I'm not going to feel sexual attraction to you or really want to have sex with you until I like really feel bonded with you. And for me personally, it doesn't take too long for that bond to form. So I've been lucky enough never to have issues where a partner is like, you're taking too long, like this is stupid and I'm leaving. I've been very lucky. But I guess, yeah, that's kind of how I explain it. It's just like I need to really feel close to you before that's something that I am even able to do personally. That's just how I operate. It's not how every demi operates, obviously, but.
Yeah, I feel like the first time I knew and came out to somebody that, like, I kind of had the first time I knew that I was demi and came out to a partner as demi, he already knew about it. And I haven't really dated anybody since that for like just a whole host of reasons. But before that, I found myself doing a lot of things just because it was kind of, I'm like, oh, this is what we're supposed to do now. This is kind of what's expected. And I wish that I could go back and tell my younger self, like, you don't have to be sexual just because, like, this is how Tinder dates are supposed to go or whatever. Like, you don't have to do that. And I think that's, like, a good thing. And also just, like, if you want to explain it to a partner, I would explain it similarly to how Kayla did. Like, if you're, looking at it from a purely allo perspective of being like, so I may or may not ever want to have sex with you. And that's just how it is. And if they don't really respect that, then like they're not really respecting your boundaries anyway. And so it's probably not a good, probably not a good partnership at that point. But if they do respect it, then great. More power to you for sure.
Yeah, for me, what happens is that I do take a considerable amount of time to start feeling any sexual attraction towards the other person, if at all. And the weird thing here is that I will only know after I've met that person a number of times. And so for all of those number of dates, that person is almost feeling like they're being led on while I'm still figuring things out. And I don't know if that's fair or not, but that's just the only way I can function. And so for me, I think it's important for me to make this very clear to anybody who seems like a good potential partner that hey, this is how it's going to happen. Is that all right with you? But for all other people who I do not see as potential partners after like let's say the first date, I don't even take the hassle of beginning to explain any of this with them. I just don't.
Yeah, I actually haven't even been on a date since identifying, so I'm not even sure how I would approach that situation if I were in it yet.
Perfectly understandable. Thank you all for answering that. I am going to ask, now that we have one question on Demi, I'm going to switch to Ray. So the next question is it okay to identify as Grey-Ace if I'm not sure if what I feel is sexual attraction or not?
Yeah.
So,
I'd say yes, because I struggled to identify whether what I think I've maybe felt sexual attraction a couple of times. I know I've definitely felt it once, but trying to identify that when you don't know, you haven't got anything to compare it to, really, and there's no checklist that you can say, right, okay, so this is the flow chart, this is definitely the answer. And I really struggled with that because with my autism side as well, like I really like logical answers, and identifying and putting names to my own emotions and my own feelings is something that I really struggle with. So yeah, I kind of identify as Grey-Ace just because I don't know half the time. So I would say definitely, yeah.
awesome. Thank you. The next question, and for those of you who missed the last answer, I think that was effectively a resounding yes, it is absolutely okay. The next question is going back to demisexuality, which is a lot of people have dismissed me saying I'm demi, and even still once I've educated them. How should I respond to people like this without getting really annoyed and / or falling out with them?
I mean, first I'd say it's okay to get annoyed. Like I understand if someone you don't want to get annoyed, if that's not ideal, and if this is a good friend that you don't want to lose, I get that. But I also think it's totally fine to like not be happy with that person, and to probably let them know, like, hey, I've talked to you about this and you still aren't getting it. I don't want to lose you as a friend, but like this is not okay. I think that can obviously be hard if you're not a very confrontational person, but I think just doing what's best for you is what's most important. Like if this is not a relationship that's making you happy anymore, if it's really detrimental to you that they are just dismissing you, then you want to think about yourself first.
Yeah, because if they're dismissing like such a big part of you, like what does that say about how they think about you in general?
Yeah. Definitely.
So it sounds as though it's about setting boundaries. Sorry, Pragati, carry on.
Yeah, I just wanted to add here that for the longest time, I thought that everybody must understand something for them to be able to accept it. But I've come to realize that that's not necessarily important, that even when people are not able to understand or wrap their head around how you function, they still have the option to just accept it and just roll with it. And I would say that maybe sometimes for me, it has been helpful to say that I'm not going to educate you on this, but you just got to deal with the fact that I'm like this. This is just how it is. You go do your own Google research, whatever you want to do, but this is what I am. So maybe that's a good way to protect yourself from burning out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like there's only so much I can Google for you. There's only so much I can write for you. There's only so much information I can present you with. And if it's still something that you're like, oh, I don't accept this about you, then at that point, like it's probably not serving you in any way. And maybe that's not what you really want in your life.
On a side note, I'm hearing quite a lot of background interference. I don't know if one of the panelists has a lot of background noise going on.
I don't.
There might be birds outside my window. I'm not sure what, it depends on what you're hearing.
I was hearing it too, but like I
There was
muted
an
my-
entire family of birds just went by my window screaming. So that might have been it.
It might have been the birds then.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for answering that. The next question I'm going to ask is, so the question is, how would you define demi-ace and what particular characteristics do they have and how is it different from an ace or a romantics? But I'm also going to open that question up to how would you define Grey-Ace and what particular characteristics do you have and different? So although the question will say demi, I'm going to ask you to answer both if you're demi and grey. Not colourful grey, but you know what I mean.
For grey, it's like a rare instance of that attraction happening, regardless of any kind of parameters or necessities in that. For demi, I would kind of call it almost the, what is it, like the best friend curse thing. It's like you've really gotten to know this person, and you're like really close best friends, and like the bonds that you have kind of make you switch over to wanting to feel that attraction. And even if you don't want to, it just happens.
Does anyone else want to interrupt?
I would say for me, demi is kind of like what Deb said, kind of having to build some sort of bond. Like I said earlier, it doesn't take me personally too long. And I think that changes from demi to demi of how well you need to know the person and like what that bond looks like. So for me, it's usually some kind of like close friendship or romantic bond, which typically doesn't take me too long, but longer, I think, than like your average allo person, I guess. And I think for me personally, it's quite linked to my mental health as well. Usually I feel very anxious about the idea of sex or anything around that. And we'll have like an anxiety attack perhaps, which is very fun, thinking about that until I get to the point where that attraction is there. And then I just feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, I would say it's also a very much a romantic bond situation first. But for me, even if I have that romantic bond, like it still takes a long time, like for that to even be there. Like I can have crushes on multiple people, but sexual attraction maybe towards none of them. And then I would feel like Grey-Ace. I feel like I use both because when I have that sexual attraction, it's still a rare circumstance. Like maybe like 5 times in my life have I ever actually had that. And like, yes, it's only been under that close bond, but it's still, even in that bond, like it's still like an outlier.
I think for me, maybe the Grey-Ace is just, it's the inconsistency, really. So I can meet someone and think, yeah, they're fine. And then I see them again half an hour later. It's like, okay, flash of sexual attraction. 20 minutes later, no, nothing. There doesn't have to be the connection. There doesn't have to be any sort of rules or boundaries. And it doesn't tend to happen again after that. So it's like a one-off random incident.
Yeah, maybe
So
I can.
that can be different for different people. So,
Pragati, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just saying that maybe I can just look at the second part of the question, which is what particular characteristics do they have that is different from aces who are romantics. So how I know I'm not just an ace who's also romantic is that when in those rare circumstances I find somebody that I feel sexual attraction to, it is a very intense kind of sexual attraction. So even though I feel it rarely, maybe I have to go through 1,000 people to feel it for like 2 people in my entire life. For those 2 people, it is an extremely intense level of sexual attraction. So I know that there definitely is sexual attraction. And if there wasn't any sexual attraction, maybe I would have called myself an ace who's just romantic. But I know that I do feel sexual attraction. So I don't identify as an ace. but instead as a demi-ace.
So I'm going to wrap that question up and move us on to the next one, which is it bad to feel bad about being demi-heteroromantic? I've been accused of creeping into LGBT plus or ace spaces, and even recently been accused by this. I wonder what you all think. And again, although the question does say demi, I'm also going to open that up to any experiences with grey heteroromanticism.
Yeah, it's almost like imposter syndrome, because when you first discover it, you're really excited about it and you finally found a community, but then you get online and you see kind of the gatekeepers saying there's no asexual spectrum. These people are just straight trying to be in our space, trying to be oppressed. And then you feel like, well, do I belong? And I've only experienced it online. I've been to ACE conferences where I felt totally in the family, I guess. But online, you see a lot more of the pushback. And I wouldn't say feel bad about it, but just, I guess, be aware and try to be more confident in who you are and understand that there are people who accept us in the community.
Yeah, I would definitely say like it is okay to not feel good about your identity sometimes. You know, like even people who have like identified a certain way for many years will go through periods where it just doesn't feel good. And I guess for my piece, I'd say that I feel like this a lot because I'm straight, and especially because I'm a demi who doesn't take that long to form sexual attraction. I kind of feel like sometimes I'm like, well, am I demi? Or like, do other demi people like think that I'm actually not demi? They think I'm just like, you know, like miscategorizing myself. And even like the podcast I co-host, it wasn't until a few months ago, honestly, like after years of doing the podcast, that I felt like I wasn't a burden to the podcast. Like I usually would think like, oh, like people are here for like ace content, and then there's me. Like I'm not bringing anything new to this conversation. And it was only recently that I was like, oh no, like a demi perspective is really important to have in ace spaces, because people who aren't demi, who are ace, like need to understand that like we do belong here. So like even for the people on this panel, I think, you know, like we're still working through it too. So don't feel too bad.
And I'm just going to, because I spotted this comment and I really like it. So I'm in complete agreement with the person who says, I hope whoever asked this question knows that they are valid and should be welcomed into ace spaces for sure. I realize that comment is not one of the panelists, but I really liked it, so I thought I'd read it out anyway, because I'm in complete agreement with it.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
So the next question I'm going to ask is, have you ever been in a QPR, or are you usually in more conventional relationships? And if both, were there any notable differences?
Mostly bad. Who wants to?
Sorry, and you.
Okay. There's a gnat. Sorry, I just swallowed a gnat. Please.
Oh, no, that's traumatizing.
Please go first. I need to take a drink of water. Oh my god.
Does anyone else want to answer in the meantime?
Yeah, I've been in mainly conventional relationships. So yeah, it's trying to balance in my head what I want compared with what I think I should want. That's the real problem for me. So no.
So that's like I was kind of in a casual QPR for a little bit, and like I feel like I actually might like that kind of relationship better now that I like very briefly experienced one. But for the most part, I've been in quote unquote conventional relationships, and I like them both for different reasons, for sure. Like QPR, I mostly like more because it's like I don't have to constantly explain my orientation to you. Like Oh, and QPR. So that is a queer platonic relationship. So that is, it's usually at least one person usually is aro-ace or ace, and like it's like a really close platonic bond. It's not just friends. Like a lot of times, people in QPRs may even have like long-term commitments to each other. I know one QPR that I knew a few years ago who got married, like legally they're married, but their relationship is still a QPR. So if that helps a little bit.
It has like the formal parts of relationship. Like I was talking about this in my other panel. Like you would talk about taxes and maybe like move in with the person and like have a joint bank. Like it's like the formal conventional thing of a romantic relationship, just with like without the romance.
Yeah.
Like a
I'm
marriage.
still holding out for tax attraction.
Yes, tax attraction. If anyone watched the romantic relationships panel, tax attraction is a new thing I'm starting if you're interested.
And I've bet someone £5 that we can't get it in conference terminology by the end of the day. So start using it. Their fiver depends on you. I'm going to wrap that question up there. And I'm going to ask, and this is aimed, I think, primarily at people who identify as demi. But if you identify as grey, please feel free to chip in anyway. How do you deal with the fast pace of online dating as a demisexual? It seems that most allo people, and for those who don't know what the term allo means, it effectively means anyone who is non-ace. It seems that most allo people are looking for chemistry that happens very early on.
It's tough because romantic crushes for me still happen pretty quickly, but like the sexual chemistry, like that's, yeah. I think that's definitely a stressor for sure, because it's like on the first date, I have to sit down and give you a lecture on my sexuality. And that's kind of frustrating. So I try to, if I ever like feel like something's going in that direction, I try to actually just explain it beforehand before it gets any further. Like, hey, by the way, and then, if they have different needs than me, then okay, it's not going to work out. But if that's cool with them, then we can keep going.
Yeah, interestingly, sorry.
You go ahead.
Yeah. So in India, somehow, it's not too surprising, but that kind of delayed sexual interaction with a potential date is considered so proper and so almost virtuous that I think it's slightly easier for me to be in India and be a demi than it would be if I was in the US, possibly, because the expectations are different there. But at the same time, we do have the quote unquote hookup culture in India now. We have Tinders and everything else, right? And so there are these expectations getting built in the younger people, younger than me, for sure. So my personal approach is to make it very clear in my profile and also in the first few conversations if I see it going anywhere at all. And in other cases, just leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to put that I'm ace in the profile, and then I open with an ace joke or an ace pun. And if it goes down well, then we can build on it and put the explanation from there. And if not, then it just turns into a friend chat. So.
Yeah, back when I was on online dating profiles, I used like Tinder in college, and once I knew I was demi. Before then, I don't know how it worked. I somehow got lucky with a person that was like chill with waiting before I knew why I wanted to wait. But I would just put demisexual in my bio, and it definitely caused some problems. I had a boyfriend who like immediately after our first date, like told all of his friends I was demi. And then the first time I met them, I had to like explain to all of his like bro friends what demi meant. And that wasn't extremely cute. So I'd recommend setting boundaries about like whether you're out or not, because I didn't, and I would go back and do that if I could. But yeah, I think being as open as you're able to be at the beginning, I guess, just so you don't, I guess, get hurt by someone that you might really like and then they end up being a dick.
Yeah, definitely. Like the short answer for me is I don't. Right before I identified, like one of the first thoughts I had in my head was like, it would be great to date an asexual because then I wouldn't have to worry about any of this. So like when I started identifying, I tried to look for maybe ace dating sites, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of them. So there's still not a lot of people on them, but it would be nice to get like some signal boosting on them so people know that there are other people like them who they'd like to have a relationship with.
Yeah, there actually is a newer site called asexuals.net or asexual.net or asexuals.net.
I think it was asexuals.net.
Yeah, I haven't personally used it because I'm not single currently. But I've heard good things. So if you're interested, I would recommend looking that up.
Yeah, I just, I think a couple months ago I did that one.
Yeah.
Cool. I am going to move us on to the next question. So thank you all for that. And the next question is, what made you start to question your sexuality? And in particular, what made you realise you were grey or demi? So that's for all of you. Have at it.
I've been questioning. Sorry, after you.
Oh, okay. What am I reading right now? Solitaire. And there was a conversation, and this is the conversation I had when I realized something's different. It's like all your friends are in relationships and starting to have sex, and you're by yourself wondering, okay, it's just me now, what's going on? And so I think that was after a few years, I realized, okay, maybe there's something more. And I think one of my friends on Twitter was asexual. So I asked them to send me some information. And that's how I started to question and get into realizing if I was gray or demi, which is why I identify as both.
I've sort of just been questioning since high school, but I had always assumed that I wasn't particularly fond of any of the sexual things, but that was because of my autism, Asperger's, rather than my actual sexuality. I thought it was like, please don't touch me. But then just nothing fit right. But then when I was at university, I was quite good friends with a girl who was openly ace, and it kind of just opened up that world to me, and I started doing a little bit of research on my own, because I was too afraid to ask her questions because I didn't want to offend her. So I was like, right, okay, I'm going to go away and do my own research. And then I knew more. And then I discovered the Grey-Ace thing as well, because I thought I'm not completely ace because I have experienced sexual attraction at least once. So that was the niche that I found that I then managed to slot myself into. I quite like labels. I think I don't have this nasty thing, but I quite like labels. So that made me feel quite good. And then it was just but I still like romantic relationships. So pan-romantic, homo-romantic, no idea, somewhere in there.
I actually like every ace person I talk to is like, or most of them are like, oh, I never had sex. I never, was interested. I was interested in, like, it felt like everybody was invited to this party, like in puberty, that I hadn't got the invite to. And so I spent so much time in high school and middle school, like asking like my friends, like, what's this like? What's this like? Because like I wanted to know, and I thought this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I actually had a lot of casual sex that I felt pretty neutral towards. In my early 20s, I was like, all right, this is happening and whatever. And then some that I really enjoyed. And I'm like, okay, there's a difference happening here. Like there's a very clear, there's definitely like a difference in these interactions. And then I had a coworker in my, like when I was like 23, who was Grey-Ace. And I kind of picked her brain about it, but I didn't want to ask her too much because I didn't want to be invasive. But I was like, so what's this? So what is it? So what is it? And like recently, she actually told me, she was like, I kind of knew, but I basically let me come to the conclusion on my own. And then after that, when I was dating an ace person and she asked me to describe sexual attraction, that's like the first time I ever learned, like I had no idea like what it really was. And then it kind of went from there, just having a lot of conversations with asexual people and demi people who were like so unbelievably helpful, like just very open and willing to share their experiences. And yeah, that's how we got here.
I actually started to question my sexuality only after I came across the term demisexuality. Before that, honestly, I had no idea it could even be an option or it was even a thing. I was quite comfortable with being the way that I was, meaning I hadn't ever felt sexual attraction towards anybody, and I was okay with it. I was just rolling with life. And then I came across the term, and everything made sense. And everything fell into place. Why have I always been like this? How come it is that the most conventionally good-looking people are also not sexually attractive to me? And how come now that I'm beginning to date maybe somebody who is not necessarily sexually attractive to other people is becoming so sexually attractive to me with time passing? So everything started to make sense. And that is when I actually started to question my sexuality for the first time. So the realization and the questioning, everything pretty much came together in one go for me.
Mine started when I started my podcast with my co-host, who's Ace. And so we were talking, every week about asexuality and aromanticism, and it kind of just made me think about my own experience. But at the time, I was in a long-term relationship that had gotten to the point where being demisexual was no longer, quote unquote, an issue, I guess. Like the attraction had already been formed, so I didn't feel like I needed to delve into that. And then after that relationship ended, I kind of was thinking about it more, and then was just casually dating this guy who really, I wanted things to be more serious because I'm demi, and so I want to have a serious romantic bond. And he wanted to date more casually. And at first I was like, yeah, that's totally fine. I'm in college, I can do casual, that's what we're going to do. And then after a week, I felt awful. I was super anxious. I was just questioning everything. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm demi. And if I would just finally admit that I'm demi, I think I would be a lot happier with the relationships I'm having and how I navigate them. So that was kind of pushed me over the edge.
Well, I am going to wrap that question up there because I'm conscious we have got less than 10 minutes. So the next two questions I'm going to combine into one, but I'm going to ask you guys to try and keep it relatively brief so we can get through a couple more questions. So the question is, how do you distinguish demisexuality or grey-asexuality from not being ready / how do you know it's not just that you desire an emotional closeness with the person, etc.? I have to pick one of the two. I'm going to pick the second one to put up. But the question is, how do you distinguish from not being ready / the one on the screen?
That I feel like I could write an entire 30-page research paper on.
I do not have time for a 30-page research paper.
I feel like the way I distinguish it is basically looking at, because I form romantic attraction pretty easily, but sexual really not so much. So I think the way I look at it is all right, I am very close to all these people and I don't feel sexual attraction to them. And then when I do, then it is very, like Pragati was saying earlier, it's very strong, it's very distinct, it's smacks you in the face. And alterous, that one's really interesting, and I feel like that's a term I don't really quite understand yet. So I'll just leave it between the close bond and the close bond with attraction and the close bond without.
Cool. Does anyone else want to jump in?
Just I really struggle to tell anyway. So yeah, how do you tell? With great difficulty.
I had to look up alterous. Sorry, go ahead.
I have to. I was trying to skip saying alterous in the question, but it has come up because that was the question I selected.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. I was just saying that I get this question a lot something that's around, maybe I am straight, but I just haven't met the person that I would be attracted to yet. That is a completely plausible situation, right? And for a lot of these people, they will say that how can I identify myself as asexual if it's a possibility that I'll meet somebody and I'll be sexually attracted to them in 10 years' time. Now, but then that is the argument that you can make for any orientation. How do you know if you're straight or bi if you may be attracted to somebody of the same gender in 10 years of time, right? So my answer to that usually is that if right now it is making sense, it's good enough. And if tomorrow something changes and you feel like you are another orientation at that point of time, it's totally fine and fair too. It doesn't have to be permanent at all.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Thank you. In the interest of time, I am going to wrap that question up. The next one I'm going to ask, going on a almost completely different theme. Have you got any recommendations of good grey ace or demi representation in media?
I know that one of Alice Oseman's books has a demisexual character, and now Radio Silence. Thank you. I know that one.
I'm writing one, but
Would you recommend it?
Do what?
Would you recommend it?
When it's done? Take your chances.
Yeah, I honestly think Radio Silence is the only one that I've read so far where there's an actual demisexual character. I'm not even sure if the main character is ace or not. She comes off as ace, but her friend, who like the story is kind of mainly focused around, he finally comes out to his boyfriend because his boyfriend basically kind of thinks he doesn't love him. So it finally comes out he has to explain demisexuality to him. And I really think that's the only one so far that I've read.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing I can think of. I have a podcast. I guess that's media.
Oh yeah, my blog. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, me.
Yeah, we're all media. If you want us, I don't know.
Yeah. I will take it. Thank you all. Next question. Again, we are going to have to keep this very, very brief. How do you deal with acephobia as a person who is grey ace or demisexual? And I think this may have to be the last question, depending on how quickly we get through it.
I am not afraid to slam that block button. Like if you're gonna be on my timeline being like, oh, this isn't real, like even as I thoroughly explain it to you, which is kind of my whole thing, we don't need to be interacting. Like in real life, I haven't had to deal with it that much. Once at a doctor's office, but very, very briefly. But other than that, yeah, mostly it's been online, and they don't need to be on my timeline. Like,
yeah, I'm one of those people who feels the need to respond, so I have to work on that. But yeah, I'm very fight me mentality when it comes to acephobia about being gray or demi. I have to try not to, but definitely. And as she said, it's mostly Tumblr, the Tumblr warriors. And yeah, I try to ignore the ones that are usually in the community, just because I know there's others in the community who don't feel that way. But if you're not in the community, it's gloves on.
I think I'm quite lucky because I haven't really encountered very much of it, and any phobics I do come up with, it tends to be homophobes rather than acephobes specifically. And you treat them with humor, don't you? So
that too, yeah.
You'd be the better person.
I think I've only experienced it on like Twitter, and usually it's either like Elle said, you like block them, or you just like have some fun making fun of them, if that helps you. And then just like turn your attention back to the actual community and try to like find solace there, because that's where the actual nice people are.
Cool. I am going to have to wrap up the discussion there because we're about to go over time / our overtime. So unfortunately, that is all we do have time for. And I hope everyone will join me in thanking Kayla, Elle Rose, Debra, Lauren, and Pragati for being such fantastic and insightful speakers. I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion. Unfortunately, we are nearly at the end of our conference. Our final panel session is at 6 p.m, which will be our concluding remarks, and we would absolutely love it if you joined us for that. After that, we do still have some informal Gather discussions on religion and spirituality and ace creators on Gather if you signed up for that. And if you signed up to Gather and just want to do some more mingling generally, Gather will remain open until 7:30. Otherwise, thank you all again for being such an awesome audience, and we will see you later. And I enjoyed the flag.
Oh wait,
Ta-da.
I left out. I've got nothing.
Bye.
I have nothing. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.